Hey guys, so hope you're having a good Sunday. As you can kind of hear, I feel a bit sick. The swimming pool is way too cold. So yeah, today I want to talk about this book. It's a book that a follower sent me actually. If you haven't heard of The Defining Decade, Why Your 20s Matter, and How to Make the Most Out of Them, it comes from a TED Talk from Meg J, and apparently it's been seen over 7.5 million times on TED. So that TED Talk was really cool. Like literally I just saw it, I read the book before, and just preparing this video, I was like, you know what, I should maybe watch the TED Talk, and I think it sums it up pretty well. So I don't want to make a video where I basically sum up all the ideas, even though I thought of making maybe a video to like share some of the content that I found very interesting. What I wanted to do was more of a book review and maybe check out some of the things I've highlighted in this book, what I found very cool, and all that. So one of the things I really liked about this book is that it was full of dialogues and examples of her own patients with very normal problems that you see all around. People that are underemployed, or people that have no idea how to get out of a relationship, and who are dating but are not like exploring, but rather like being with people that they don't want to be a whole life with. And she touches on all those problems and she offers solutions, and she also talks about how these people changed after therapy, and it's like full of those dialogues from therapy, and obviously the names were changed for confidential reasons, but it just makes the book very alive and very touching and very real. And one of the stories she does talk about in her TED Talk, and the stories are great. One point I really like about that is also that she's not talking about this one example that was hugely successful, but she's talking about normal people. And I think you learn a lot more from mediocrity and people that are really normal than you learn from the best. Another thing I like about this book is that it's written by Meg J, who is a psychoanalyst. It's not a book like written about someone who just wanted to write about a subject. It's written by someone who knows the research. Like this book is like full of research, full of like statistics, and full of things that underline huge tendencies in society and people in their 20s. And that's what I found very enriching and also very, down to earth and real in this book. So I didn't want to talk about this book for too long and only tell you guys about what I like it, but I wanted to jump down to some of the things I've highlighted in this book, and I'm picking them randomly. So this is something I highlighted that she wrote, which was page 103 on dating down, and it's Masood Khan who says the most difficult thing to cure is the patient's attempt at self-secure. Very few lines are perfect, and because young people are generally resilient, many bounce back from difficulties with their own solutions in place. They may be outdated, imperfect solutions, but they are solutions nonetheless, ones that usually resist dismantling. And I found that very interesting because we all have tendencies to find solutions to our problems. And what I found very interesting about this is that we all find our solutions to our problems. Like, for example, I know that at some point I felt a little lonely, for example, in Germany, and all I would do was like date down. Like I would literally not really care who I was dating or who I would have anything with. And I would be like, I'm in my 20s, I can just enjoy life and go from one person to the next and not really care. And then I realized I was losing my time, and that was just a solution to like try to feel a little less lonely, and that wasn't a good solution. And the problem of those solutions is that they're most of this time not like healthy, and they don't help you build in the long term. And that's why I thought it was so enlightening to be conscious of that, to try and pick out in your daily life all the things that might be like wrong solutions, things that may even like seem healthy, but that are not healthy if you like overuse them. Like for example, the example she takes is one client that was feeling very bad about like her dating life. Obviously it's a chapter on dating down, and what happened is that she would listen a lot to like music, because only the music could be about like could like express everything she would feel. And so all day long she would listen to her music, and that would be her way of getting it through the day. And the problem of doing that is that she never like faces the fact that, you know, she's living unhealthy relationships, and she would never talk about it around her. She would never talk about it to her friends. She would only talk about it, and at the beginning, not at all, with Dr. McJ. And so what I found interesting in that is that even music, which might sound like not a bad solution, you know, you feel bad about something, you want to express it, well, you listen to music. Well, if you do it too much, any solution ends up being not so good. And so I thought that was a very interesting point, because realizing that helps realize like the own fabricated solutions you find for yourself, and that you should be, you know, more careful of using. Okay, so now I'm gonna pick another quote out of this book that I also liked, maybe on a different chapter. That would be cool. Oh, that's a chapter about being in like, and you'll understand what she means by that. So I'll read the sentence. Often these go hand in hand. That is because the more similar two people are, the more they are able to understand each other. So without context, you're not going to understand that. But since I've read the book, well, I'll just explain the context. So basically, people are like, you know, opposites attract each other, and that's what makes people attractive, and that's what makes people complementary and work out. But in terms of like social status and like what you've done as studies, what statistics show is that couples that work the best in the long term are most of the time people that are like, in terms of like personality, social status. And there's also a very interesting part in this book where there's a way of like looking at personality depending on like different criteria. There's actually even a table on that in the book. And yeah, here it is. And it's about like the big five. So you judge a person on their openness, consciousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. And all those things are very interesting, because if you realize that, you know, some people are like from one very high end of the scale and one very low end of the scale, then sometimes it makes it, you know, personality not very compatible. So that's very interesting to know, because, you know, sometimes you just lie to yourself because you think the person's attractive, and you're like, okay, well, the personality is not the same, but we'll work things out, and in the end, you might just feel unhappy. And it's not just about, you know, rather you're alike because you have the same religion. It's also about like personality. And I thought that chapter was very enlightening on like how to pick your partner. Okay, so last quote I'm gonna choose randomly out of the book. Here we go. Likewise, in the 20-something years, even a small shift can radically change where we end up in our 30s and beyond. So that's very interesting, and I found the metaphor that comes next also huge and amazing, because it's also a metaphor that James Clear uses in Atomic Habits. It's the idea that, you know, if you make a slight change to an airplane when he leaves from like say Paris, well, it can either land in Africa or in the US. And that's how we realize that, you know, just choosing a direction early is so important to realize how you end up in the end. And that's the same thing about habits. It's the same thing about what she talks about, which is identity capital. It's so important to like know in which direction you're going, so that you can build your identity capital into that direction. You know, build the things that are going to be meaningful for the person you want to become. Did I say it was the last quote, or should I do one last one? I didn't highlight that much in the book because I don't usually read and highlight, but, you know, sometimes I find it interesting to highlight. So here we go. Wow, a lot of yellow. So when Daniel called her mother, she was doing what psychologists call borrowing an ego. She was reaching out in a moment of need and letting someone else's frontal lobe do the work. We all need to do that sometimes, but if we externalize our distress too much, we don't learn to handle bad days on our own. And that's a chapter about calming yourself. And that's so important, because she talks about how when you're young and 20-somethings, well, you tend to be very sensitive to things and take things very personally, especially at work. And when you grow up, well, you learn how to, I don't know if you can use that word in English, but relativize. Um, tonic accent's probably wrong on that word, but it's just so important to realize that you can reframe things, and you shouldn't take things too personally. And what I thought was interesting is that this quote is an echo to what I talked about listening to music too much. What she would do, Daniel, she would call her parents every time at work just to get through the day. When it's so important to try to deal with yourself. You're not gonna die. It's not the end of the world, but you just have to live with it and go with it and realize and keep like a optimist mindset, and not be like this is gonna be bad. Everything's gonna change, and never feel like something's gonna be stay the same way forever. Okay, that was just a bunch of nonsense. I hope it makes sense, but that's the key point. Nothing stays the same in the long term, so don't feel like this particular situation is going to last forever and it's always going to be so bad, and don't take things personally. I think that's the takeaway in there. Now I'm looking at the different lessons that I've written down that I thought were very interesting. So there's a lesson about confidence in there, and I thought that was a really interesting takeaway, because basically people believe that confidence just comes from yourself, that you can just act confident, fake it, and eventually make it. And basically what she says is that confidence is outside in and not inside out, and inside out is a myth and outside in is what really happens. You become confident in something when you master it, when you become good at it. When you start at work and you have no idea how things are going to work out and how to do things, well, it's normal to not feel confident. And if you are confident, well, you're basically faking it. And confidence without work is usually arrogance. And I thought that was a very interesting point, especially that she took out a statistic that came out of a study that she cites. And basically the statistic says that you have to work 10,000 hours on something so that you can master it. That means I think 40 hours of work a week for like 10 years in order for you to master and really feel confident about something. And that really puts forward how important it is to like work so that you feel confident, and not just stay there and be like, I'm not confident. Another takeaway I've learned from this book, and I thought it was very important, it's about like how the 20s are really a sweet spot in our like developmental state. We learn a lot when we're small children. Most people know that, but maybe a lot of people underestimate how much we develop in our 20s. The biggest personality changes in our 20s. In our 20s, it's like the biggest like transitional state between adolescence and adulthood. And so this critical point is just so important to take advantage of, and that's why it's so important to like build things during our 20s and not just enjoy and keep on living adolescence, And the problem is there's a huge myth, and I see it around a lot, that people feel like, you're in your 20s, you just have to enjoy and have fun and not ask yourself any questions and not plan ahead, when it's just so important. Because and otherwise, if you start your life in your 30s, when you'll be like, whoa, I can't do that. I things won't add up. I can't have a kid do the work, and sometimes people don't realize how time goes by, and that's why it's so important to like work in your 20s. So yeah, I hope this book review and maybe some of the concepts I've shared in this video has made you guys maybe want to read this book. I would be very happy if it makes you want to read the book. If you do, don't hesitate to reach out and tell me. I thought the book was really cool. It's structured in a very interesting way. It has a chapter about work, it has a chapter about love, and it has a chapter about brain and body. So brain and body is what I've been talking about, calming yourself, and some of the other things where you feel like everything's going bad, but you can always reframe. And yeah, it's a very interesting book. It's written in a way which is quite accessible, I feel like, and so I definitely recommend it. So yeah, if you have any questions, if I made mistakes in what I've like said in this video, don't hesitate to write it down in the comments. I'm very happy to do this video. I've been wanting to do book reviews for quite a long time because I like reading books, and I feel like it's an activity that's less and less people do sometimes, which is kind of sad because you learn just so much from reading. And yeah, hope you liked it, and see you next week for another YouTube video. Bye!